Good morning, everybody. This is our garden this year. Instead of potatoes, we did some squash and some tomatoes. Squash, we've had maybe like a half dozen come in, but the tomatoes have been absolutely prolific. It was like nothing, and then, oh my God, we've got tomatoes. So we got to figure out something to do with it, and I have an idea. So let's go down and pick up some tomatoes. All right, everything else has got a little bit of green in it, so that'll be it. This year's been pretty crazy. We had these crazy tomato hornworms just everywhere, and those things decimate your plants fast. So I've become kind of obsessed with checking those plants like every 2-3 times a day just to pick those worms off, because they plow through those. I'm headed to the farmer's market to see if I can pick up a couple things. I'm looking for some cilantro, some garlic, and maybe some onions. Might need some more onions. We'll see. Such a cool little market. So sad when it was all shut down for the COVID, and when it reopened, it was just like pick up only. You had to order online, all their stuff. But usually it's got like some live bluegrass, and it's kind of got a really good energy to it. And the vendors are awesome. The food's amazing. So it's good to see it back.
I don't know. I changed my mind. Till then I was a rambling kind. The kind of love I can't explain.
I didn't know this for the longest time, but I always thought this was a knife sharpener, and I don't think it really is. I think it's just something, like, it's not putting more of an edge onto the knife. It's just as you use the knife, the edge kind of gets a little bit distorted and off in some places, which makes it functionally dull. And this is just setting the edge nice and neat in a straight line again, so it's functionally sharp. I think that's all it does. I've been griping about basically cooking every meal in one pan. I've got one burner, I've got an Instant Pot or an air fryer, toaster oven. Those are my choices for all my cooking. So she was like, hey, one man, one pan. So today is the first one man, one pan. And today I'm gonna do a fermented salsa. So I'm not just gonna cook anything, but I'm just gonna preserve something. And this is coming about because we had so many tomatoes this year come in all at the same time. And I'm just like, well, what are we gonna do with them? So the answer for that usually is, well, let's just stick it in a jar and let it ferment for a little while. The recipe will be in the description down below. So it's gonna be tomatoes. We're gonna do obviously a bunch of diced tomatoes. The recipe calls for 2 pounds. We're just gonna see what that looks like with my little scale here. And I'm just gonna start to eyeball, but it calls for that, and then it calls for, I think, 2 small onions. It calls for 2 bunches of cilantro. I'm probably just gonna do 1, and then also I'm gonna add some shiso leaf to that. Shiso leaf is this wonderful, wonderful herb. That is, it's very much like a cross between basil and mint, and it has some medicinal properties that aid in digestion, kind of help soothe your tummy. So it just, fermented things generally can be somewhat of a tonic, and I think that this will add to that. I'm not going to put anything spicy in there. Christina doesn't do peppers. She doesn't do spicy. She just can't. So I'm just going to keep that out altogether and throw in a little lime juice, and I think we're there. So I'll go ahead and take you through it. That was just a few tomatoes, and the recipe calls for 2 pounds. That was about a little bit more than half a pound. So I'm just trying to fill up a half-gallon mason jar. That's my target. So we'll just kind of feel it out, but I'll be keeping track. So this knife is not super sharp. I really do need to get a sharpening stone and just really put an edge on this thing. With a dull knife, working with the tomato skin is a problem. See how it just wants to dent and squish instead of cut? Here's what we're doing. Cut the tomato in half, then cut off the skin part on each half, and then cutting where the skin isn't. Just slice this through roughly in half. And then from there, just do your dice. Three tomatoes, three small medium tomatoes, and that's just a little bit more, again, over half a pound. So it looks like about a dozen small to medium tomatoes is going to be the number for 2 pounds. We'll see how far that gets us into the mason jar. Like a mountain of cilantro, so I'm just not even going to bother with this, just to keep it simple. So I'm just going to chop all this stuff, add it in, but just looks like maybe this bunch is bigger than like her bunches in the nice lady in the recipe down below. So I don't know, let's try this. What we have left is really simple. Just going to juice 2 limes. We're going to cut up 1 small red onion and 6 cloves of garlic. Mix it all together, and then we'll get it into the jar. Last ingredient is the salt. For sea salt, this is the best in my opinion. It's got a lot of really good mineral content in addition to the sodium. It's from a pristine source. Redmond's is a good one too. It's got some stuff that this doesn't have, so usually alternate between those two. So we're just going to do a tablespoon of fine ground sea salt. I'm just going to mix it up. Okay, so when you're tasting it, you want it to taste a little salty. You don't want to be overwhelmed by it, and you don't want to not taste it either. You just want to register a little bit. There's a little bit of salt in there. Now we're ready to put it in a jar. So the one thing I realized I really need to get is a funnel, because this is just going to be a messy pain in the butt. But let's do the best we can here. Now I'm just going to try to tamp this down. What you want is the least amount of oxygen that you can get in here. So I'm just going to kind of push this down, get out some of these air pockets that might be lurking in there. Okay, then you want to take a weight. In this case, I'm just using a cabbage leaf. Just going to put this on the top. Just try to push everything around it down a little bit. Trying to keep as much of this covered in liquid and water as possible. Now this is something that I think is pretty cool. This is the Easy Fermenter Lid that I got. It came with a pack of 3. And on this little dial, you can select which date it is. So you can put today's date so you can keep track. So we're only gonna let this ferment for maybe 2 or 3 days. And that's because this is gonna keep for, this will keep for a few months in the fridge. The refrigeration will slow the fermentation down, but it doesn't stop it entirely. So it's going to continue to ferment over these next a couple months or however long it lasts. And with these, so usually with other lids, you have to remember to burp it. So the gas builds up from the fermentation, then you got to let it out just in little bits. This does that for you, so you can just basically walk away from it, set it, forget it, and be done with it. Okay, so just screw that on. And put it in kind of a dark place out of the sunlight where it's going to be a consistent room temperature. So I'm just going to put it right over underneath our water cooler, and we'll check in on this in a couple days. Okay, salsa's in the bag. On to the other things we got to do today. So first is to change the water filter. Now, we have figured out that we know it's time to change the water filter when our water pressure starts to go down. So, you can see from the sink, significantly less, and then if you flush the toilet, it becomes even lower, and that really doesn't happen much when everything's flowing right. We're going to go ahead and change the filter because that seems to be related to a lot of the sediment that we have. I think the sediment just kind of gunks up everything in the filter, drops the water pressure. This happened like 2 or 3 times now where, it's only been a couple months, we have a lot of sediment that comes through our water lines. This is our little water closet, and it's got our well pump housed in it. That's our enormous real-time water heater. It's a little water bladder that we've got, and this is our filter. And as you can see, it's got a lot of iron bacteria, sediment in it, and I think that's the problem that we're trying to solve. So first, we're gonna shut off the water. I'm gonna take this out, wipe it down, put in the new filter, fire everything back up again, and we'll see what it looks like. Yeah, that's 4 double circuits. Gonna bleed out the lines, get all the water out. We used to leave the lines open when we restarted the pump, and we were surprised at all the sediment that we were kicking up with it. We were like, damn, we just changed the filter, like should be less sediment, not more. And what we realized is that when the pump first turns back on, if there's low pressure in the lines, it will dig deep. So it sends a lot of power into the pump to try to draw the water up through the lower pressure. So it tries to make up for the pressure, I guess. And with it, so when it digs deep, it goes to water that it doesn't typically get into, and that water apparently in our well has a lot of sediment. Let's check this thing out. Look at how just thoroughly saturated with sediment that thing is. I mean, that's what's in our water if it's not there. It's crazy. I'm just gonna give this a little wipe. Something we discovered is important, this little ring here, sometimes this will stick to the top, come off, and then it's not a perfect seal. Water will splash all over the place when you turn it back on, so make sure this is nice and situated. So this is a new type, we haven't used this one. This is actually just what they had. They've been out of our type of filter. It's filters down to the same micron size. I think it's 5 microns. And I don't see any other difference. So I'm gonna screw this guy back in. I'm going to take the filter off the bypass so that water will flow through it again, and we'll fire it back up and see how it does. We're just gonna start with the water pump. We're gonna wait for some of the sediment to filter out before we start running it through the water heater. So, water pump on. I can already tell you that looks significantly better. Carbon gets flushed. All right, we're just gonna let that run for a little while, and we'll check back in with it in a little bit. All right, that only took like 5 minutes. You got everything running pretty clear again. So switch on the hot water. That's way better. It was taking forever. It was taking like 20 minutes to fill this tub. And now we got it going. and that's it. 15 minutes from start to finish. Got the water filter changed. So this is just something you got to do with well water, especially I guess our well water. It's got a lot of sediment in it, so just something we're gonna have to deal with. Not a big deal, but I don't know. If you have a well and you think that your water pressure is going down, this might be something you could go to first before calling anybody. Just try to change the sediment filter if you have one, and see if that makes a difference for you. All right, so I'm going to show you the project first. That this is one of those projects I mentioned last week that we've been working on, and it's been just slow going. We're trying to put up vertical shiplap on this wall, and we're in our kitchen. And here's our kitchen window. This is the back of the house here. This wall faces towards the shed, I guess, is the best way to locate it. And then we've got the cabin room is right behind us. And so this wall is going to have a fridge here, and it's going to have some open shelving in the bottom with a countertop that I'm going to make, and like a little hutch with covered doors that's going to go right in the corner there. So we have our internet and all that stuff is just kind of hidden away. And that's a good thing because this baseboard is just crazy. So somebody thought it'd be a good idea to place the middle stud here, like 3/4 of an inch into the room further than all of the other studs. Well, except for maybe the ones at the end. So it's like, or maybe you can think of it like 2 of the wall studs are moved back on either side of the middle. And this is what it did to our baseboard. Yeah, we got these 2 gaps. So there's the far stud, the stud that's further out, and you've got the ones that are further back, and then it's flush again in the corners. So I don't know what that's all about, who decided that was a good idea, but it is what it is. So we're trying to roll with that. I can't continue to live, so this is the horrific part. I can't continue to live in this. I mean, this is just, I've got like gym equipment everywhere. I've got construction equipment everywhere. And it's like, this stuff doesn't have another place to go. I can't put this wood someplace else. So it is what it is, and trying to make the best of it. And so today I'm gonna try to at least get the rest of the baseboard in. I've got a cutout for that little electrical box that we've got there. So I've got to cut out like a little mouse hole for the core there, and then just get it to fit right along this wall. So that's what we're doing. Our protection. I don't know why it's such a struggle for me to remember that, but it is. Okay, so this is the rough end for the kitchen sink. This is where the kitchen sink's gonna go. This is a wire that was installed for garbage disposal. We have a septic system, so we're not gonna do garbage disposal, but we may want something under there at some point, maybe a water filter or something that requires electricity. So we're just gonna keep it locked behind this box, but the box needs to come out so we can put baseboard and shiplap. So I'm gonna go and do that. Tight fit. Now I just need to make the mouse hole for this wire. So I'm gonna put it over it. So I'm gonna make a mark right where the middle is, then kind of get the edges, and then use this circular drill bit to take out the 7/8 inch and see if that's enough. So this is for cutting through metal. I knew it the whole time. This is for wood. Not too bad. It chipped a little bit when I did the drill. Nothing I can do about that. So close enough for rock and roll. So now I'm going to find the studs because I want to screw the baseboard, and the trim that we're going to put up here needs to go into studs. So I know that I'm pretty sure there's one here. Let me just test this out here. Okay, now that we have an idea where the studs are, I'm going to just draw a line in the middle where I found it, and just draw a vertical line up and down so that we can just place the trim and the baseboard into those studs. we're running these lines in response to the height of the framing of the window. So the top of the trim that we're going to put up is going to be even with that. So I had to draw a line using the level all the way around that was the top of the window. And then we're going to put a 2-inch piece on top. And so I just needed the width of that to be able to calculate how high I should put the shiplap. So I've got the 2 lines on the wall here. The lower one is where the shiplap goes. The upper one is where the trim that goes on top will end. So now that I've got that, let's put up the first piece of horizontal trim. Get to the vertical shiplap itself. So shiplap, if you're not familiar with it, there are wood panels that basically have an overlap between the 2 panels, so there's an appearance of a uniform gap in between each one that runs vertically. Well, this one is going to fit with its own lip right over top of it, and then you're left with this kind of gap. Uniformly all across. Okay, so here's how I've got the corner lined up. You've got to have the tongue of one. The under part here needs to be facing towards, so you can just put another one on top, another one on top, another one on top. And it needs to also do that on the other side, so the other under also needs to be facing the direction in which you're going to go. I had to put them next to each other, and actually this works out pretty well. The gap I like, it's pretty minimal. And it just looks neat and uniform this way. So I'm just noticing as the measurements go along the wall, the measurements are getting a little bit longer, maybe like 3/8 of an inch maybe by the time you get to the end. And checking the level, this is perfectly level. Baseboard, nothing I can do about that. It's just the floor is just not even. Baseboard is definitely not level. So that's the explanation, that's good. At least this is level, that's what I want.